Welcome back to the You Are Amazing show. It is my honor and privilege to be here with you today. You Are Amazing is a show about you, totally about you, and the amazing person that you are. We have guests on this show that help you become more amazing, but it's about you. It's good to have a show just about you, and that's what we are about. You hear that you are amazing, you may cringe and say, what's this guy talking about? But when we look at human potential and the things that have been done by human beings, when you look at Helen Keller, when you look at these people with physical deformities or no legs who become skiers and who've done, really amazing things, human potential is infinite. It really is. What you can do with the body and the mind, what I've studied and researched, and if you do that studying and research yourself, you'll see that human potential is just a vast area where, if you explore it, you'll see that people do amazing things with the same skill set that you have or the same background that you have. They've come from nowhere and have found energy and power within themselves to be amazing human beings. So that's the great example. If people like that can do it, we know you can do it. This morning, today, you may not feel fantastic. You may feel down. You may be going through some difficult times. You may feel like you're a loser because you're out of work. You may feel less than, or you may feel not good enough because a relationship broke up. Whatever's going on with you, I'm here to remind you that you are amazing. The only credentials I have in this show is my experience. I always say I'm an ordinary Joe with ordinary life experiences. But the things we talk about in this show and the guests that come on, I have seen firsthand. If I've experimented and done it in my life, and I've seen the results. So I'm here as a witness to say these things will work to help you become the amazing human being that you are, even if you don't feel like you're amazing. So that's who I am. When we look at being amazing and how to become amazing, you can get lost. There's a plethora of programs out there, self-help books, people telling you this is the way to happiness, this is the way to success. There's so many things out there. But what I've found, meeting some of the most successful people in the world who, what do I consider successful? Happy and joyous, content, with good relationships in their life. Money has nothing to do with it. Some of the most successful people I know don't have any money. Don't have much money, but they have great friendships. People look up to them. That is success to me. So the underlying current among all the successful people that I've met are basic concepts that we talk about here every week: to love, give, serve, forgive, and then sprinkle it all with gratitude. That is a starting point. Look out, because you will become that amazing person. There's a lot of work beyond that. But if you start with those basic things, and I'll just focus on gratitude for like 30 seconds here. Let's do gratitude today. If you're sitting there and you're not feeling great, you're feeling yucky, just think about the good things in your life. Any good thing in your life. You have the function of your body, the limbs. You have a car with tires on it. Yeah, the treads may be low, but you have a car with tires on it, like a lot of people don't, in third world countries and what have you. So there's a lot to be grateful for. Right now, take a moment as you sit through this show and grasp onto that, the thing to be grateful for. Think about that, dwell on it, and after the show, do the same thing. So those core concepts, with gratitude as the base, as the foundation for everything, will help you become that amazing person. All right, so you may be sitting there now saying to yourself, you know what, I volunteer at the church, I go out and get groceries for that elderly person who can't get out, I give 10% of my income to the church, I'm doing all these things, Ed, I forgave this person, I'm doing all these things, Ed, so what are you talking about? It's not working, I don't feel like that amazing person. As I said, that is the baseline, but the next step is identifying things that are holding you back. And that's the great thing about this show. I bring on people who talk about that, who will kind of wake you up to what's holding you back. The show today is on one of the major things that hold people back: addiction. There's so many different types of addiction. There's love addiction, there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's food, there's codependency. Again, I'm not an expert on any of those things, but I just know when I see people who are good people and they're suffering, and they don't feel like that amazing person, they have that one core thing that's holding them back. And a lot of times it is addiction. It is alcoholism or addiction. And that's what we're going to talk about on this show today. We're going to talk about alcoholism and addiction, specifically because I am a person in long-term recovery. I am 50 years old now, and I got sober when I was 26 years old. So I've been sober a number of years. I've been living life without alcohol or drugs for a number of years. And before that point, when I was 26 years old, before that point, I didn't feel like an amazing person. I felt like a person who wanted to love, give, and serve, and I tried to give, and I tried to do these things, but it always ended up where I'd have some sort of big issue related to alcoholism or drugs, and it held me back. And not until when I was 26 years old and I got help, I sought help, did my life start to get better. From up to 26, my life was a downward slope. From 26 to 50, it's been a slope like that, of course, with hills and valleys and what have you. So that's why it's a special show for me too, to talk about that and focus on recovery and how that is so important for you to become that amazing you. My guest today is Sandi Coyle. She's with the Greater Seacoast United Way. She handles misuse of alcohol and drugs prevention, and she brings programs into schools. They really focus on youth, and she's done so many good things. In her life, she's also a person of long-term recovery, so we have a lot in common. But she used that deficit, like I talked to you so many times in this show, she used this deficit and she gave back. She found a career, she found something that she could do at this point in her life where she could give back and share her pain, what used to be her pain, which became a great benefit to her, because now she's bringing in programs to schools and helping so many people. And her life is just a life of, I've been blessed to know her a long time, and I've just seen her grow and grow and grow. She's becoming this amazing person as each day goes by, because she's willing to use the concepts we talk about in this show, and she took care of the boogeyman in the closet, the addiction. She took care of that, and she takes care of that on a daily basis, and then she gives back to others. She's an amazing person. Let's bring her on right now. Sandi. Hi, Sandi. Good to see you.
Thanks, you too.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sit down. All right, the audience knows that I get goosebumps all the time, and I did doing that with you because I know the miracle that you are, and I've seen you grow, so I got goosebumps. You're amazing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the show. And as I was talking to you about before, we have that in common. You're much younger than I am, but you stopped using drugs and alcohol when you were how old?
26.
26 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was 26 too. The same thing.
I tried stopping for the first time when I was 24, and it stuck by the time I was 26.
Yeah, it isn't easy, is it?
No,
to
it's
stop?
not.
Yeah,
And
it isn't easy.
especially at that age when you feel like you feel alone with that kind of a decision. You know, college years, post-college years, and the partying just seems to be surrounding you at that time of life. So I did feel alone with that decision.
Isn't it confusing too? Because I look at my years in high school and afterwards, before I stopped, and I had a lot of friends who partied pretty heavy, just like I did. But they ended up moving on with their lives. They ended up getting married, and other things happened, and what have you, and they could move on. Where I was stuck. Alcoholism an addiction is a funny thing. Some people have problems from early on, like you and I did, and some people end up having problems later in life. I read this one article where a woman was 70 years old. She lost her husband, never had a problem with any issues with alcoholism. She lost her husband. She started to drink daily where she was, and after 6 months she couldn't stop drinking. She crossed the line, and she started having problems. But you and I want to focus on youth on this show.
Yeah.
If you have a problem out there, and you started when you were younger, or you started when you were older, this is still about the block that's keeping you from being that amazing self. So please listen closely, and we'll have some good resources at the end to direct you. getting back to our youth, yeah. So a lot of people, that was the confusing part. Well, they all were like crazy with me, but like I was. But when I look back, I look at, I always took it to the next level. I always was a little bit more, because I did cross the line in my teens, and I started having issues. When did you first start with alcohol and drugs? How young were you?
Well, I'd say actually my first drug was over-the-counter weight loss pills. It was just one way to get me feeling differently than the way I was feeling, and it was another tool to get attention from my peers that I didn't feel like I was getting otherwise. So unfortunately, that right in our corner drugstore was really my first drug.
How old were you again?
I was about 12 or 13.
Okay, pretty young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And were you really overweight or no?
No,
no,
not
right.
at all. No.
It's speed though, right?
It gave me a little buzz, and it was just something that I could go and do and feel rebellious and feel like I was putting some control back in my hands, because I think my life at that time, not different than a lot of other kids' experience. My parents were separating. My dad had moved out of state, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of control in my life, and that was a really uncomfortable feeling. And I didn't have the tools to know how to reach out and ask for help, or I didn't want to burden my mom with, on top of the stresses she was already having with the effect on me, and so it was a way that I could put some control back into my hands and try to feel differently. And
it sounds kind of funny, getting more control by being a little more out of control, right?
Right. Right.
It was your individual choice, and it's funny how that comes, or how our mind makes that, right? Isn't it? When did you start with drugs or alcohol? When was your first?
I'd say by 14, I had my first.
So freshman in high school. We're filming in a high school now, so it's pretty poignant.
Well, and actually, it was 7th grade that I kind of went to the first party and drank quite a bit excessively.
Really? So how were your high school years? Was it a progression there, or did you start later?
It was definitely a progression. I had parents, whether I was living with my mom or my dad or going back and forth, I had parents that were involved with me, were doing their parental responsibilities. So I was kind of an opportunist, and would go to the party on the weekend that I knew I could get away with, and so that progressed, but it really escalated once I hit my college years and post high school, and had a lot more freedom without that parental monitoring.
Yeah, it's on my end. I found in high school, that's when it's really escalated for me, and my self-esteem was hit. I was never comfortable in my skin. I had a speech impediment when I was young. I was always nervous. I remember my legs shaking all the time and sweating profusely. I was always a nervous kid. And when I took that first drink in high school, it was like an exhale. I felt like, wow, this is easy. It was much easier feeling that way. So from that first drink, for me, it was like, wow, it's the release. I didn't have to think about my speech impediment, which got better over time. But it started taking, and I wanted to talk to you about that. For the youth out there and for the adults that can identify the taking part of addiction. For me, it started taking. I wasn't as good of an athlete I could have been. I wasn't as good of a community member or a student member or a friend or any of these things, because it hit me early on. And with that, it started to hit my self-esteem when you start getting in trouble and having issues. So I started having lower self-esteem, and because of that, I wanted to drink more, and I didn't know that, but of course, the snowball effect took effect.
Yeah.
So that happened to me early on, and it progressed, pretty quickly. So we talk about limiting beliefs on this show. You said you had parents who were involved, and you're pretty good that way, and but a lot of times with drinking and alcoholism and addiction, you start feeling less than. You start, when you wake up in the morning and you did these things and what have you, you start feeling less than. How much did that affect your life and decisions you made in your life? That compiling of all these things that happen with addiction and alcoholism that piled up, and now you're an adult trying to live in this world, and you're making decisions. How much did your addiction affect the decisions, life decisions? Tremendously,
really. And it became overpowering before I even knew that's why that was driving a lot of my decision making or my behaviors. And I think that's a really important point. And you mentioned the prevention work that I do, and a lot of the prevention work we try to communicate. First of all, when we survey youth in New Hampshire, less than 50% of youth, high school age youth, report feeling like they matter in our community. And that's a pretty big weight to shoulder.
Yeah,
when
that's huge.
So about 47% of our high school age youth report feeling like they matter. And that may not be expressed outwardly. A lot of the prevention work we do is not just directly to youth, but to the adults in our community that are part of the environment that our kids live in, to give them the tools to help kids feel like they do matter, whether it's business owners and having a sign on your downtown store saying you are amazing. That's a pretty powerful statement. With teachers, not just focusing on the importance of academic performance, but helping kids feel a part of the school community. And parents having conversations with their youth to show them, to demonstrate that they do matter. Being active listeners as much as we are kind of communicators and often talking a lot to our kids. But showing kids and giving them outlets to show that they do matter. Substance use disorders is a tricky thing, and it's a very stigmatized topic, so it's often hard for parents to feel comfortable having those conversations or feeling like those conversations are relevant in their home. Oh, my kid's on the football team, he's probably doing fine, he's doing great on schoolwork. Well, you mentioned, I was predisposed to the disease of alcohol and alcoholism and addiction, and nobody really would have known that. I didn't know that until well into my drinking, my years of drinking, or maybe even more so once I found recovery, because I learned what that all meant. So there's a lot of kids that or people that can use alcohol, that can use drugs, and on the outside look like they're holding it together okay. And so we have limited opportunities, I think, on getting the education, getting the information of why it's important for kids not to use substances, not to use alcohol until the legal age of 21 because of the brain chemistry. And the earlier we use alcohol, the more likely we are to experience negative consequences, or the more likely we are to develop addictive behaviors.
There are a lot of reports out there that show, and I just read one on pot, and how it really affects the mind, and how it can cause long-term problems. Everybody takes it so lightly, but it can cause long-term problems. And I think with all the things you talked about in prevention and what's out there, I think the powerful part of our story here, talking to the guests today, we're two people in long-term recovery, right? And the things that you mentioned weren't provided to me when I was young. We didn't have people coming in the school. We didn't have people planting seeds saying, look at this. Look at this. If I had the seed planted, maybe I would have, stopped drinking and using drugs a lot earlier. And I also look at, the failings of inadequacy and what have you, and all these failings that you mentioned, that these kids feel a certain way, and it's hard to talk to them about that. That's why this opportunity for you and I to talk to this audience and say, especially to kids, listen, be careful. If you're doing this, be careful. It's going to have long-term consequences, and you could have serious things happen to you. And in my life, personally, I just started talking about long-term recovery in part because of you. You invited me to a movie that talked about it being a stigma, and a lot of people don't talk about it. I'm proud, and I've told many people that I'm in recovery, but not until, even on this show, I didn't talk about it too much, and now I'm having a show saying it out there. I'm out there, right? This is a big thing, going out to the community to say, I had these issues. I stopped at 26, but I had these issues. And you were a catalyst for that, for inviting me to that movie, and you're involved in an organization that's trying to get the word out more and more, and there is a stigma to it. And the National Council of Alcoholism, that Marty Mann started back in '44, had a group of actors and prominent people get together in 1976, Dick Van Dyke, Buzz Aldrin, that said, hey, listen, we're in recovery, we're in long-term recovery, we had these issues, and so getting out there for me and you, to the youth out there who are just starting life and trying this stuff, to say, look out. It ruined my early youth, and quickly, and let's see if you identify with this, and then we'll get into more of the other things you were talking about. The emotional growth, when you start when you're young, I started when I was 14 or 15, and you stop emotionally growing. Like, I was drinking at the school dances, I was doing all these things. I wasn't really growing up. I wasn't, feeling loss and pain and rejection because I just, drink over. When I got sober at 26, I felt like a 14-year-old. Did you have the same thing happen?
I did, absolutely. And it wasn't long after I got into recovery from alcohol and other drugs that I also became a mom. I became a wife and a stepmom, and I was really learning how to embrace all of these things in my life and be the person I wanted to be to all these people as a sober woman for the first time since I was 14, before I was 14 and picked up a drink. So having those relationships and walking through the discomfort and walking through the insecurities and the self-doubt was all new, and I'm extremely grateful that I had tools of recovery and a program of recovery and a fellowship of people that had that experience before them, and kind of in their tool belt, that, like you said, the service piece, were really willing to share it with me so that I could start walking into that journey.
And it's miraculous, like I said in the beginning of the show, because, we come from this place, we brush ourselves off, we get here, and it's hard to make it, because a lot of people think people with addiction or alcoholism don't have any willpower. I had a ton of willpower. I did 2 years of school and one to try to, make myself feel better, because I got basically asked to leave my first year of college. I had willpower, but it didn't work. It didn't work when it came to stopping drugs or alcohol. So now we're here, we're living this life. I know that you're living a wonderful life, you're living the dream, you meet challenges head on, you feel the pain, and you grow from them. Your work now with the Greater Seacoast United Way, you bring programs into school. We have like 4 minutes left of the show, and we're gonna put up some websites and what have you. One is your website at the United Way, which is what?
It's ASAPNH.org for Allies in Substance Abuse Prevention.
Yeah, and that's Sandi's page, and she is a leader in that for the United Way, and it's her passion. She teaches 12-step recovery yoga. She's a yoga teacher too, and she volunteers and does it at this recovery house. And but in New Hampshire, recovery.org is a group that's advocating recovery and putting the word out there and lessening the stigma. Tell us, and we'll put up that website too afterwards. Tell us, in a couple of minutes, what's the most important things for our audience, parents who have kids with problems or kids themselves. There's a lot, I know.
Yeah.
So if you can think of one or two things that are most critical. You said them before, basically, but identification of the problem.
Right. Oh, that is such a big question. And for me as a person in long-term recovery, and what that means is I haven't had to pick up a drink or a drug in over 10 years, and it's given me a life to be a mother, a daughter, and a very dedicated and passionate woman committed to sharing and being of service to those in the greater Seacoast communities. I think one of the most important things...
Goosebump alert, goosebump alert. Go ahead, I'm sorry. I just get excited you talking about this because I know you so well. Go on, I'm sorry. I just always have to do the goosebump alert. We need a graphic goosebump alert for Ed on the show, but go ahead.
I think one of the most important things happening right now, and with the Hope for Recovery New Hampshire, is empowering people that have found recovery from this disease to celebrate that face and voice of recovery. And I truly believe that that's going to allow our prevention, treatment, and recovery system that so many people are working to build in New Hampshire, and you doing these kinds of things are really enhancing that, will make it that much more effective. When we can see people living lives in recovery and what that looks like, giving back to our communities, that this is a preventable disease, that it is a treatable disease, then I think we're that much more empowered to have the conversations early on, to take education and information for the resource that it is, not something to be intimidated by, and to really start breaking down those barriers to, as kids or as adults, to feel like we're alone with the fears that we have or the low self-esteem that we have, and to say there's other people that have worked through these challenges, and there's so many tools available, whether it's yoga or mindfulness practice or meditation, exercise, running, there's eating healthy food. There's so many tools available to give our souls, our body, mind, and spirit the nourishment to feel good on a daily basis. And it can be that much of an effort, but I've looked back in hindsight and said, every day that I put my best foot forward and I show that faith, even when the mind chatter tells me, nope, you can't do it.
Yeah.
You're not worth it. I push through and I just show up anyway, and I realize how significant that is, and the lives that I have the gift of being a part of as a result. So.
Thank you so much. And you are part of our nourishment today. All those things you mentioned, we try to bring on the show: food, exercise, everything else. But Sandi talked about such an important thing today with addiction. And we both talked to you about our issues and what happened to us. And we're evidence of there's a great life. If you have an issue with it, there's about 7% of the population out there that can't drink or use recreational drugs, whatever that is. And if you're one of the 7%, your life is slowly going downhill and you can't understand why you're having all these losses. If you think that might be you, go to Sandi's website that we mentioned earlier, and we'll show at the end too. And there's also another website we'll show, New Hampshire Recovery. There's so many resources out there. Take that first step. Take that action step. If you take that action step and start looking at this issue, you can have an amazing life, and you can be that amazing person. But if you have this issue, you're going to be running to walls again and again until you tackle this head on. And there's so many people there for you. Sandi's there for you. She's there for kids, and she's out there helping kids. So there's people and resources out there that want to help you get better. We love you. I'm so happy to be here. Remember to love, give, serve, forgive, and be grateful today. Go off right now and be grateful.
Let's
Take
end with
care.
a namaste.
Namaste, says Sandi. Amen.